I never thought I'd be in a situation where I'd have to ask the internet if I was the bad guy. But here I am, because when love, heartbreak, and a messy past all live under the same roof, someone's bound to get burned, and maybe that someone is me. Have you ever been in love with someone who's still tied to their ex? Not emotionally, but through circumstances that just won't go away? Like no matter how much you try to move forward, their past keeps knocking on your door. Literally. That's been my life for almost a year. My name's Lily, I'm 30, and my boyfriend, let's call him Mark, is 35. He's kind, patient, protective, and the kind of man who fixes everything but himself. I met him at a coffee shop near my kids' school last year. He had this quiet sadness in his eyes, like someone who'd been through a storm and hadn't quite made it out. Turns out, I was right. Mark had just ended a 9-year relationship with his ex, Hannah. They weren't married, but they might as well have been. They had shared a house, his childhood home, and together they'd been raising an 8-year-old boy named Eli. Here's the twist, though. Eli isn't biologically Mark's son. He's Hannah's nephew, but Mark had been raising him since he was a baby. So to him, that boy is his son, and I respect that. In fact, it's one of the things that made me fall for him. His loyalty, his sense of duty, the way he cared for people even when it hurt. But what I didn't realize was that love like his could become a trap. Because when Mark and Hannah broke up, she refused to move out. She said Eli needed stability. She said Mark was cruel for asking her to leave. And every time he tried to reason with her, she'd threaten him. If you make me move, you'll never see your son again. It's the kind of emotional blackmail that eats at you. So for months, Mark's been living like a ghost in his own home, sleeping on a love seat in his office, walking on eggshells, trying not to wake the woman who technically no longer belongs there. When I'd visit, he'd always apologize for the mess, for the chaos, for the awkward silence in the hallways. I'd tell him it was okay, but deep down I hated it. Because it wasn't just awkward, it was wrong. He deserved peace. And I deserved a boyfriend who could hold me without worrying if his ex was in the next room. But that day, everything blew up. None of that was on my mind. I just wanted a quiet morning with him. It was our day off. I dropped my kids off at school, drove to his place, and the sun was just rising. That calm, golden light that makes everything look softer than it really is. His house smelled like coffee and paint, because he'd been fixing up one of the rooms again. When I walked in, I didn't see Hannah's car, so I figured she was out. I smiled, texted him that I was there, and walked straight to the kitchen to grab a drink. That's when I saw her, sitting at the table, hair tied up, no makeup. Just staring at me with this look, not of surprise, not even of anger, but of pure exhaustion, like she was tired of me existing. I froze. "Good morning," I said, trying to sound normal. She didn't answer. I grabbed my drink, walked to Mark's room, and closed the door. My heart was racing, but I tried to brush it off. "She's home," I whispered. Mark sighed, running his hand through his hair. "She told me she had work today," he said, shaking his head. "I don't know what she's doing here. It should have ended there. We should have gone about our day, ignored her presence, done anything else but what we did next. But when you've been forced to tiptoe around someone for months, the second you stop caring, it feels liberating." We laughed about something stupid, talked about our weekend plans. He brushed my hair off my shoulder and said, "I just want to feel normal for one day." And in that moment, I wanted that too. To feel normal. To feel loved. To feel like his. So when one thing led to another, it wasn't about defiance or revenge. It was about escaping the suffocating weight of that house, the tension that had built up for months. But then, everything shattered. About an hour later, his phone buzzed. He looked down, and I'll never forget the color draining from his face. It was her. The message was long, angry, accusing. "How could you? While I'm home? You're disgusting. Both of you." My stomach sank. I didn't even realize she was still there. She must have heard us. Mark clenched his jaw, typed something fast. She says it better not happen again, he muttered. And I told her, if she doesn't like it, she can move out. There was silence after that. Not relief. Not victory. Just silence. The kind that makes you wonder if you've crossed a line you can't uncross. I looked at him and whispered, "Did we do something wrong?" He didn't answer, because deep down I think we both knew. Maybe we weren't the villains, but we definitely weren't innocent either. The next morning, the air in Mark's house felt heavy, like something toxic had settled overnight and seeped into the walls. Mark barely spoke. He sat at the table, staring into his coffee, scrolling through his phone with this blank expression that wasn't anger. It was defeat. I wanted to say something comforting, something to break the silence. But every word I thought of felt wrong, because deep down I knew what we'd done had ripped open a wound that was already festering. I asked softly, "Did she say anything else?" He shook his head. "Just threats. The usual. Said she's gonna tell everyone what kind of man I am. Said I humiliated her in her own home." I looked around. Her home? No, this was his house. His childhood home. The one he was still paying off, still trying to make his own again after years of being trapped in someone else's version of it. But that's the thing about heartbreak. It doesn't follow logic. To her, this was still her space, her life, her family, and now she'd been forced to face the truth that she wasn't part of that picture anymore. That night, I went home to my apartment. My kids were asleep. The quiet should have been peaceful, but it wasn't. I sat in the dark, thinking about Hannah. How it must have felt, hearing us. How humiliating it probably was. And even though I knew I hadn't done anything truly wrong, a part of me still felt dirty. I tried to shake it off, telling myself she chose to stay. She's the one refusing to move on. But guilt has a funny way of blurring right and wrong until they look exactly the same. The next day, Mark called me. His voice was tight. "She's losing it," he said. "She packed up Eli and left this morning." "What? Where'd she go?" "No idea. Said she's not coming back until I learn some respect." He laughed bitterly. "Like I'm the one who broke up our family." There was something in his tone, a crack I hadn't heard before. It wasn't anger. It was fear. I could tell he was terrified that Hannah might actually follow through this time. That she might really cut him off from the boy he'd raised since birth. "She can't do that," I said quickly. "You're his father figure. Legally, I'm nothing," he interrupted, his voice breaking. "I'm not on any papers. I've got no rights. If she disappears with him, there's nothing I can do." My chest tightened. I'd never heard him sound so helpless. Later that night, he texted, "I can't sleep. Every sound makes me think she's back. Every silence makes me think she's gone for good." It hit me then. This wasn't just about us. It was about a man torn between his past and his future. Between guilt and survival, 3 days later, she came back, not with apologies, but with fury. She slammed the door, stormed into his office, and started yelling. I wasn't there, but Mark told me later her words cut deep. "You think she's different? You think she's gonna save you? You'll ruin her the way you ruined me." She said things that weren't true, things meant to hurt. Things about me, that I was a homewrecker, that I was using him, that I didn't care about Eli, and the worst part? Eli heard all of it. Mark said the boy just stood there, wide-eyed, clutching his backpack. He didn't understand, but he knew it was bad. And Mark, instead of yelling back, just whispered, "Please, not in front of him. That's the moment." I think when something inside him broke, he called me that night and said, "I can't live like this anymore. I'm getting her evicted. Officially." And he did. He filed the papers through the county. 90 days to vacate. She laughed when he told her. "You think a piece of paper's gonna make me leave?" she said, but it wasn't a bluff this time. And for the first time since I met him, Mark looked like a man who was finally ready to fight for his peace. Except peace doesn't come easy. The following weeks were tense, like waiting for a storm to break. Every time I came over, I could feel her eyes on me. Sometimes she'd mutter under her breath when I passed by. Sometimes she'd say nothing at all, which was somehow worse. One evening, I arrived to find the front door open. Mark was in the kitchen, his face pale. "She took Eli," he whispered. "What do you mean?" "She just left. Said she was taking him to her brother's. But I called him. He hasn't seen her. I don't know where they are." He looked like he was about to collapse. For a few seconds, I couldn't breathe. The world just tilted. Because suddenly, this wasn't about jealousy or resentment anymore. It was about a little boy caught in the middle of a war he didn't ask for. I put my hand on his arm. "We'll find them," I said, trying to sound certain even though I wasn't. He nodded, whispering like he was trying to convince himself. "She's just trying to scare me. She'll come back." But deep down, neither of us believed it, and that's when I realized the fight wasn't about the house, or the relationship, or even the breakup anymore. It was about control, and Hannah wasn't about to lose it quietly. Mark didn't sleep that night. Neither did I. He called every hour, voice cracking, asking if I'd heard anything. If I thought she'd really gone, I kept saying, "She'll come back." But even I stopped believing it after the third call. The next morning, he showed up at my door. He looked like a man who hadn't eaten in days, eyes red, hands trembling around a mug of cold coffee he forgot to drink. "She's cut me off," he said, changed her number, blocked me on everything. "Eli's school says she called in and said he'd be homeschooled now." He rubbed his face, whispering, "I don't even know what city they're in." There's a special kind of helplessness that comes when you love someone who's losing everything right in front of you. All I could do was hold him while he shook. 2 days later, an envelope arrived at his mother's house. Certified letter. Inside, an official complaint from Hannah's lawyer. She was filing for full guardianship of Eli, claiming Mark was emotionally unstable, that he'd been harassing her, that he'd brought strangers into the home while the child was present. That stranger was me. I still remember reading those words, my stomach twisting, because in black ink, I wasn't Lily. I was an inappropriate female presence. Mark crumpled the papers and slammed his fist against the wall. "She's turning my life into a weapon," he said. I tried to calm him, but his voice kept breaking. "I was just trying to move on, Lily. I just wanted a normal life." That night, he sat in his car outside my apartment, staring at the steering wheel. "She's gonna win," he said quietly. "She's got the kid, the sympathy, the story. Everyone's gonna believe her." I reached for his hand. "Then tell your story, too." He looked at me like he wanted to believe that was possible, but didn't know how. Weeks dragged on. The house felt emptier, quieter. Hannah still had another month before the eviction deadline, but she wasn't there. Just her ghost, her perfume lingering on the curtains, her photos on the wall. Mark started taking them down one by one, stacking them face down in a box. He didn't cry. He didn't say anything, he just whispered, "I'm taking my house back." Then, one afternoon, it happened. A knock at the door. Hannah stood there, Eli beside her, clutching a toy car. Mark froze. She stepped inside like she still owned the place. "We're staying until the court date," she said. "You can call your fancy lawyer, but good luck proving anything." I stood in the hallway, heart pounding. I wanted to yell, to tell her she couldn't just walk in, but then I saw Eli, his small, confused eyes darting between all of us, and my voice died in my throat, because this wasn't a battlefield to him. It was home. Over the next few days, the tension in that house was unbearable. Every sound was a trigger. Every silence was louder than shouting. Mark tried to keep things civil for Eli's sake, but Hannah made sure every word cut. At dinner one night, she said, "You think I don't know you're playing happy family with her? In my house?" Mark set his fork down. "It's not your house anymore, Hannah." "Oh, right," She laughed bitterly. Because you bought it with all that guilt money, huh? Eli flinched. I couldn't take it. Hannah, I said quietly. Maybe not in front of him. She turned to me, eyes burning. You don't get to tell me what to do with my son. The words sliced the air. Mark stood up so fast his chair crashed backward. He's our son, he said, his voice trembling. Stop using him as a shield. She didn't answer. She just scooped Eli up and stormed out. The door slammed. That night, Mark broke down for the first time. He sat on the floor, hands in his hair, whispering, Maybe I should just walk away. Maybe she wins. And that, more than anything, terrified me. Because I could handle her hate. I could handle the whispers, the stares, even the guilt. But I couldn't handle watching him give up on the one thing that kept him alive. So I told him, if you let her control you through fear, you'll never be free. Not for you, not for Eli. He looked at me, eyes wet, and nodded. Then he said something that made my heart stop. I'm going to court. Tomorrow. He wasn't bluffing. He gathered every photo, every school report, every message showing he'd been the one caring for that boy. He even printed the eviction notice, the one proof that he'd tried to end the chaos the right way. And as I helped him organize the files, I realized something I hadn't before. This wasn't just his fight, it was ours. Because the moment I stepped into his world, I became part of the storm too. The courthouse smelled like coffee and fear. Mark's hand was ice cold in mine, but he kept squeezing it like he needed to make sure I was real. When they called his name, he stood a little straighter. Like the boy he once was still trying to prove he could be brave. Hannah sat across the room, perfectly composed, hair brushed smooth, soft cardigan, no trace of the woman who'd screamed at us in the kitchen. Her lawyer leaned close, whispering rehearsed words that made her nod slowly, eyes glassy with practiced pain, and right between them sat Eli, small, fidgeting, clutching that same toy, car like it was armor. The judge asked questions. That sounded simple, but weren't. Who provided care? Who paid? Bills? Who made medical decisions? Each answer carved a different version of truth into the record. When Mark spoke, his voice was steady, but his fingers trembled. I've cared for him since he was 6 months old, he said. I don't want to take him away from her. I just don't want to be erased. The courtroom went silent. Even Hannah's lawyer stopped typing for a moment. Then she stood. Your Honor, she said softly, my client only wants to protect her nephew from instability. The respondent has been bringing unrelated women into the home, creating emotional confusion. Her eyes flicked to me. Unrelated woman. I wanted to vanish into the wooden bench. Afterward, in the hallway, Mark exhaled like he'd been holding his breath for months. She made me sound like some kind of stranger in his life, he said. I touched his sleeve. She's scared, Mark. Scared people rewrite the story. He nodded but didn't answer. We walked outside. The wind cold enough to sting, and that's when he said it, almost to himself. She lied about something. I just don't know what yet. A week later, he called me from his car, voice shaking. I found something, he said. A file in her desk, old hospital papers. I felt my pulse quicken. What kind of papers? Eli's birth records, he said. Lily, there's no father listed, but there's a note attached. It says confidential adoption pending family placement. He paused, breathing hard. She told everyone he was her nephew. But he isn't. He's her son. For a moment, the world blurred. 9 years of half-truths suddenly rearranged themselves into a story that actually made sense. Why she clung to that boy so fiercely. Why she used guilt instead of honesty. She'd built an entire life on a lie. And now she was cornered. When I saw her next, she knew we knew. Her face was pale, lips trembling, not with anger this time, but shame. You think you found the truth? She whispered. You don't know anything, Mark's jaw tightened. Then tell us. Tell him. She looked toward the hallway where Eli was playing with a puzzle on the floor. Her voice cracked. If I tell him, I lose him. You don't understand. He's all I have left, and that was the first time I saw her as something other than the enemy, just a mother terrified of being unloved, but Mark, he couldn't see past the betrayal. He turned away, whispering, "You used me." You used him. That night, he packed a suitcase for Eli, just clothes, his favorite books, the toy car. He wasn't planning to take the boy. He was planning to be ready in case the court granted him visitation, hope in the form of a duffel bag. I sat with him on the floor. "What if she runs again?" I asked. "Then I'll find them," he said. "But this time, I'm not running after guilt. I'm running after truth." And even though everything around us was breaking, I could feel something new forming beneath the wreckage. Not victory, not forgiveness, just clarity. Because love isn't always about who's right. Sometimes it's about who stays. The final hearing came faster than anyone was ready for. The night before, I couldn't sleep. The rain hit my window in long, uneven rhythms, like the world itself was anxious for what tomorrow would decide. Mark paced the hallway, phone in his hand, reading over statements he'd written and rewritten. Every word felt like it might change a life. When dawn came, the house felt weightless, quiet in that eerie way things get when there's nothing left to say. Mark turned to me, his eyes hollow but clear. "If this goes bad," he said, "promise me you'll leave. You don't deserve to drown in my mess." I swallowed hard. "It stopped being your mess the moment I loved you." He smiled, just barely. And for the first time in months, I saw the man I'd met in that coffee shop, tired but still standing. The courtroom was smaller this time, more personal, like the walls themselves wanted to listen. The judge flipped through the files, sighing quietly. "Before we continue," she said, "I need to confirm something about the child's birth records." My heart hammered. Mark looked at me. I nodded once. The judge adjusted her glasses. "According to this documentation, Eli is not, in fact, the petitioner's nephew but her biological son. Miss Keller," she looked directly at Hannah, "can you confirm?" For the first time, Hannah's mask cracked. Her lips trembled, eyes darting toward Mark, then to the boy sitting near the social worker. "Yes," she whispered. "He's my son." The room went still. Mark's shoulders sagged, not in anger, but in something like relief. The truth had finally spoken for itself, the judge continued. "This changes certain custody parameters, but it doesn't erase the child's established emotional bond with Mr. Lewis. The court will recommend joint guardianship and supervised visitation to ensure stability." Hannah's lawyer tried to object, but she raised a hand. "Enough. This child deserves both love and honesty. That's the only verdict I care about." And just like that, years of shouting collapsed into silence. Outside the courthouse, the air smelled like rain and asphalt. Hannah stood a few feet away, holding Eli's hand. She looked smaller, like the fight had finally left her. Mark walked up slowly. "He deserves to know the truth," he said gently. She nodded, eyes glistening. "I know." Then she turned to me. "I hated you," she said quietly. "But I think I was just jealous that you weren't afraid to move on." I didn't know what to say, so I just whispered, "We all get stuck somewhere." Eli tugged Mark's sleeve. "Daddy, can we go get ice cream now?" That single word, Daddy, hit him like sunlight through a storm. He knelt down, smiling through tears. "Yeah, buddy." "We can." That night, Mark drove me home. No music. Just the hum of the road and the sound of breathing that finally wasn't heavy with guilt. He stopped in front of my building, turned off the engine, and sat quietly. "You could leave now," he said. "Start fresh." I'd understand. I looked out at the empty streetlights flickering on one by one. "I could," I said. "But love isn't clean, Mark. It's messy and it hurts, and sometimes it's the only thing that keeps us from breaking." He nodded slowly, eyes shining. "Then let's try not to break." A week later, Hannah moved into a small apartment nearby. Eli spent afternoons at Mark's. painting walls and asking 1,000 questions about life and love and forgiveness. The house, his house, finally felt alive again. Sometimes, when I watch them laugh in the yard, I still feel a pang of guilt, like a ghost brushing my shoulder. But then Mark looks up, catches my eye, and smiles. And I remember that healing doesn't erase the past. It builds something new on top of it. Maybe that's what all of us were trying to do from the start. To build something that could survive the wreckage. Because in the end, love isn't about winning or losing. It's about staying when it would be easier to run. 6 months later, the house looks different. New curtains, fresh paint. The couch that once felt like exile now sits in the living room, draped in sunlight instead of guilt. Sometimes I still catch the scent of old memories hiding in the corners. Coffee, rain, and regret. But they don't hurt the way they used to. Mark keeps a picture of Eli on the mantle. Every other weekend, the boy comes running through the door shouting, "I'm home!" And each time he does, I feel a small piece of the past loosen its grip. Hannah and I never became friends, but we stopped being enemies. When she drops Eli off, we nod, exchange a polite smile, talk about school schedules and scraped knees. There's a strange peace in knowing that forgiveness doesn't have to mean forgetting, just means choosing not to keep bleeding. Sometimes people online still ask if I was the bad guy, if having that moment with Mark while she was home made me heartless. I used to replay that morning over and over, searching for a version that looked cleaner, kinder. Now I understand there isn't one, because life isn't built out of perfect choices. It's built out of the ones we're brave enough to own. I wasn't a villain. I wasn't a saint. I was a woman who fell in love with someone trying to rebuild his life. And in doing so, I stepped into the wreckage of someone else's. And if there's one thing that time has taught me, it's this: you can't fix a broken home by setting yourself on fire to keep it warm. The other night, Mark and I sat on the porch while Eli slept inside. The sky was clear for once. No thunder, no echo of the chaos that used to fill every corner of this place. Mark leaned back, looked at me and said, I think we're finally okay." And for the first time, I believed him. Maybe peace doesn't come with a clean slate. Maybe it comes when you stop trying to rewrite the past and start writing the next chapter. So, if you're listening to this, if you've ever loved someone who carried ghosts into your heart, remember this: you're not defined by the worst day you made a human mistake. You're defined by what you choose to build after the dust settles. Because in the end, love isn't about being perfect, it's about being honest. Even when honesty hurts. What do you think? Was I the villain for loving someone who wasn't fully free yet? Or was I just another human, trying to find a little bit of peace in the middle of someone else's storm? If you were in my place that day, knowing his ex was still in that house, would you have walked away? Or stayed and loved him anyway? Tell me what you think in the comments below, because honestly, I still wonder if I did the right thing. Soft fade out. Emotional outro music rises. Real stories. Real emotions. Real people. Comment your thoughts below. I read every single one. Subscribe for more real-life stories that hit different.